Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, April 7th, 2017.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, we are on the verge of the end of the 2016-2017 regular season. Most teams have one or two games left. All the playoff spots are not resolved in the Eastern Conference. In the West, it's just a question of positioning. So we'll focus on the East. Today. There were, this is the funny thing here. We had 12 games yesterday. We have one game tonight.
And I know it stinks for people in a way.
Yeah, and the thing is, the one game is important. But let's talk about the games last night. And since I cover the Leafs, I try not to be on the webcast. I try not to be Leaf centric here, but it's impossible not to be with what happened last night because it was the absolute worst case scenario. If you could plan out everything, this is, first the Sens Bruins was a 3-point game. The Islanders won, and the Lightning won in regulation. Now we'll start with the Islanders because that was just the game that was sort of the least interesting, but they're tied with Tampa Bay right now, so they have as good a chance as Tampa to catch the Leafs and make the last wild card spot. But they win 3-0 in Carolina, and the interesting thing here, and you pointed this out yesterday, is all of a sudden after being dispatched to the nether regions of Bridgeport, Yaroslav Halak is now what, 5-0-1?
Yeah, and this is for most of the season. It's not just like for a week or 2 weeks or even a month. This is like for,
I think it was January. I think it was January or early February.
Yeah, a good portion of the season. And it's a crazy story. And here's the thing. They still don't have a great chance of making the playoffs, right? But they're in it. If they run out the string and Halak keeps winning, but they don't make the playoffs, what are they going to do for goaltending next year? They've signed Greiss. How do you switch back to Greiss and tell Halak, hey, thanks for that, but you're back to being the backup? Oh, well.
Yeah, but it's a similar situation to what happened in Philadelphia. The signing of Neuwirth is not part and parcel with him being the starter next year because you have expansion. You can say, we signed Greiss because we wanted to make him the one available in expansion, although I think if they're going to protect one, they're going to protect Greiss and they're going to expose Halak.
They'll expose Halak, and he won't get signed. Not for that money.
He won't get picked up by Vegas making over.
He won't get picked up, brother. Yeah.
Yeah, he won't. But they are, they're at 90 points. They did respond to the coaching change. Doug Waite has helped us.
It does show you how little 90 points means now, too. 90 points used to be a good point total back in the day. 90 points now, it's like, whatever.
Well, yeah, and ironically, like a week and a half ago, we were, on another webcast or another podcast, we were talking about how many points Toronto would need to make the playoffs. Well, and everybody said 93.
You mean off the post on Blog Talk Radio? Yeah, got it.
Yeah, there you go.
Like tonight? Yeah.
At 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
But they're at 93, and they're not a lock. So, okay, so
crazy. I will say this about that game. So I watched – here's how my TV viewing was set up last night. On my big TV, I had the first two games of the College Frozen Four. We're doing a recap of that on SiriusXM starting tomorrow, right? So we did that. On my computer, I had the Met game, and Matt Harvey was pitching that, and that was great. On my phone, I had the Leafs and Tampa. And so, I'm taking all of this in, trying to catch what I can catch. And the one thing that I noticed about the Leafs-Tampa game was I think they had a 2-1 lead, right, Tampa? Once they had a lead, they were feeling it. Once it was 3-1, they went in lockdown mode, and there was nothing the Leafs could do. It was one of those things where this is a veteran team that knows how to win.
Right.
And once they felt like they were in the driver's seat, it was over.
Russ, I watched that game from beginning to end. They were tight from the very beginning. the Tampa goal didn't help any. They came right back, and Kadri got the tying goal, and it was back to, and they had a few man advantage. Honestly, the thing that really shocked the system of the Leafs was the Jake Dotchin hit on Austin Matthews. Thankfully, Matthews was okay, but I described it as a knee on knee. It was more like knee on upper thigh, but you could see his leg buckle a little bit, and it was a bit of a concern until he came out the next shift and made a dash for the net. But there was like a hush in the crowd, and of course the cameras went to Matthews' parents who were in the crowd, and his mother wasn't too happy at the the situation. And Jake Dotchin, and I commented on this last night, he's building himself quite a reputation because he low bridged Kasperi Kapanen in the minors and put him out for almost 2 months. And then if he would have done that to Austin Matthews, I think there would have been a death warrant on his head in Toronto. But yeah, I mean, they were tight, and you can tell, even though half the Tampa Bay Lightning team is the Syracuse Crunch, the guys like Kucherov and Braden Point scores 2 goals, and Palat and Killorn, the guys who've been in Stanley Cup finals and Stanley Cup and conference finals, they stepped to the forefront, and the guys on the Leafs were tight.
Yeah.
And that's the concern. I mean,
I'll also tell you a play, Gus Katsaros, who's on Twitter, he used to write for Sportsology. McKean's, I'm not sure if he's still with McKean's.
He wrote with HockeyBuzz too.
HockeyBuzz, great guy.
Yep.
He noticed something and took a GIF of Kasperi Kapanen, and this is why it takes a while to become an NHLer. There was a point where he rips up the wing and gains the offensive zone quickly, kind of like when I talked about Michael McLeod last year before the draft, and then when he was there, didn't know what to do with the puck. Didn't know who it was going to pass it to. He didn't have a plan other than I've got to get into the zone and get there fast. And that's not necessarily a good plan. And that's the problem when you have those players that are sort of in between playing right now against a team like Tampa who's completely seasoned.
Yeah, and a guy like Victor Hedman, who's one of the best defensemen in the league. I think he had 3 assists last night. I mean, let's just say this. I mean, like I said off the top, everything that was bad that could happen for Toronto yesterday happened. And the other game, and we'll talk about that one before we go on to talk about the overall situation. The Bruins and the Senators. Carlson did not play. Neither did Marchand. Surprisingly, Cody Ceci was back, so I think that illustrated the importance of the game.
Oh yeah.
And Boston took a 1-0 lead. Alex Burrows scores in the second period, and it was basically a chess match from then on.
It was a big goal from Burrows. Like, that's something where you say, hey, look, we like to rip Burrows for, the smarminess and other parts of his game, but that was a heck of a goal.
Yeah, he's played well for them since being acquired from Vancouver. But the Senators are hurting in terms of injury, and at a certain point in the third period, both teams didn't want to make the mistake. They just wanted to get the point, and they did. And then it goes to a shootout, and Tuukka struck me as being a great shoot. I just hate this time of the season, and I know you do with the Rangers back in the history with Ole Jokinen and in Philadelphia. I don't like the shootout when it comes down. I don't like the shootout when it comes down to the last couple games of the season, because getting in and not getting in the playoffs, it's tough.
I'm telling you, it's not a fun thing. It might be for the fans, but it's not a fun thing to cover, and it's probably not a fun thing as a player to have your season coming down to the shootout. It's just not.
Yeah. So right now, the Senators are at 96 points. The Bruins are at 95 points. The Maple Leafs are at 93 points. Toronto has 2 games left. Senators have 2 games left. The Bruins only left against the Washington Capitals on Saturday. The one game tonight is Tampa Bay at Montreal. Now Tampa Bay, I'm assuming they're going to go with Vasilevsky on back-to-back nights. It's already been reported that Carey Price is going to start for the Canadians, but Emelin and Weber. This game is sort of meaningless for the Habs. They're stuck in first.
It is meaningless for them. Again, I've talked about it for a month and a half, 2 months. Their focus was the Rangers. It always was the Rangers. It is the Rangers, and it's going to be the Rangers.
Right. Now, Tampa Bay, they play the Habs, and they finish the season on Sunday afternoon against Buffalo. So it's improbable that it's going to come down to Sunday because the Islanders, and I'm struggling here with the.
And by the way, I'm going to go that Stamkos is 50-50 for that Buffalo game. I think we're going to see him practicing again if he hasn't stopped, and I think we're even going to see him in the pregame skate for that game.
Even though he said probably not yesterday. I mean, maybe he said that because it was in Toronto and it was it builds up
to get rid of the firestorm. Yeah.
Right now the Islanders play the Devils on Saturday. The Rangers and the Senators play. So the Senators play New York. The Leafs play Pittsburgh.
And we'll say New York in quotes because there's a lot of guys that won't be playing.
And then on Sunday, you've got Toronto playing Columbus. You've got Buffalo and Tampa playing. You've got the Senators and the Islanders. So, in a way, I mean, if the Islanders win on Saturday, I mean, they're going to be motivated to beat the Senators, and the Senators are probably going to play a stripped down line. See, this is the interesting thing about this last weekend. You look at Toronto's schedule and you say Pittsburgh and Columbus, but Pittsburgh is locked into second. Columbus is locked into third. So will Crosby play? Will Kessel play?
Right, that's the whole thing. That's why you don't know what's going to happen in these games. You just don't. Now, the bad part for a team like the Islanders is if teams keep winning, they're done. It doesn't even matter them.
Right. If the Leafs get 1 point, I believe both them and Tampa are done. I'm not 100% sure about the tiebreakers.
Sounds about right, though.
Yeah. If Toronto gets a win, then both of them are eliminated.
Right.
And we're struggling here with some
Google hiccups. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about this, guys. So we may have to end the show early if it keeps doing this. The problem is that, I mean, we go back to the discussion we had yesterday. Right now, Toronto is only concerned with getting in because they've lost 2 in a row. But if they get in and finish in the second wild card and play Washington, I don't know how much better that is than missing the playoffs. That's
Without getting into a long, drawn out thing. I still think it's good. So
yeah,
I'm just gonna. I mean,
I may be on an island on that one, Russ. I personally don't think it's really beneficial for them to play Washington and get killed, and I think they will get killed. And
I think you're on your own island. I'd say it's more like Staten Island than a tropical island, if you ask me. And we'll leave it at that.
It's not Tahiti, is what you're saying,
right?
So I mean, but right now, Tampa and the Islanders, they just need to win.
Yeah, they can't do anything but win. Like that's their focus is let's just play out the string and win and see what happens because they need help, and the help would be the Leafs keep losing.
Yeah. Now, okay, we'll touch on some things quickly here because, like I said, I don't know how much how.
I'll bring up the quick part about the college free agents since we do have the Frozen Four going on. There's going to be a few right off the bat. Sean Malone, who plays for Harvard, they got eliminated. In a great game, by the way. People should watch the last minute and a half of that game. Just tremendous. But anyhow, Malone, a West Seneca guy, drafted by the Sabres. We hear zero talk about the Sabres possibly signing him. I don't hear anything. And he's a local kid. For the first 3 years, didn't do a lot. This year he had 42 points, 18 goals in 36 games. He's 21. It's not like he's a 23-year-old or a 24-year-old. Like people will remember back, I didn't like Matt Gilroy, because he was an overager when he was winning a championship, and I felt like, that really helped him. Malone's 21. I think somebody is going to take a run at him if the Sabres don't get him, but that would take until, again, August 15th.
Yeah.
So he's one to watch. And again, he's a local kid. You would think that would help a little bit, but the problem is there's a lot of guys who play in the Sabres organization, same position, similar type, and so maybe he's not going to want to sign. It's a possibility that it's like that. We've got Tyler Moy, who scored some huge goals for Harvard just to get to the Frozen Four. And first year he had 12 goals. Second year he didn't play a lot of games. Took a little bit of second year he had 12 goals. Third year he took a little bit of a step back. This year he's just been all world. 22 goals in 36 games, 45 points. If I told you he plays for the Nashville Predators, I don't want to send up the flares so that I get another text from David Poyle. But again, we don't really hear much about their interest in him. So I'm going to leave that part of this alone, but just say if he gets to August 15th and somebody else signs him, then we are starting to see a pattern for players not getting signed, college players getting drafted by Nashville and not getting signed by Nashville.
Well, the one that I'm focused on, and I'm sure a number of NHL GMs are going to be focused on, is Will Butcher. And you were saying yesterday that there was some indication that Colorado is basically out to lunch when it comes to signing him before August 15th.
They told him last year they weren't interested last year.
Yeah.
So to be fair, Buccigross said that on the broadcast, and of course it sent shockwaves. But people who watch this show, I've been talking about Will Butcher for a couple of months, maybe 3 or 4 months, saying that this could happen. And with the kind of year he's having, and he's playing in the finals, could win a national championship, had an amazing wraparound goal yesterday, just playing great. It's going to be hard for them to sign him now. Now, it doesn't mean it won't happen, but I would say odds are he's going to ride it out to August 15th and see what his options are, because he's going to have the most options of anybody coming out of college now. And so this is an opportunity for, a team like the Leafs, again, a team like the Rangers, again, Detroit, teams who are looking for another defenseman, who have other players that they could sort of push out there in the forefront and say, this is why you should sign with this team. Like if I'm the Rangers, I had Jimmy Vesey go and talk to him, had him at the meeting. Those kinds of things, that could be a big deal. You told me there's a Leafs connection with the Denver Pioneers.
Yep.
All those things. Because this kid can play, and he can definitely be a pro. Like, I'm not even questioning whether he could play at the pro level. What I will question is, what will his role be? Like, he's not going to be the top pairing guy like he is in college.
No.
But he could play. And so this is a heck of a player for some team to get. And I think we're going to see this unfold. And unfortunately, it's going to drag on all summer. But it will for all three of these guys, and probably a few more that I haven't mentioned. And so we'll see. But it's an interesting thing now, because I felt like we saw more college free agents being signed this year than any other year. I don't have facts to back me up, but if I look one day, if I get a number, I'll post it. But again, now it looks like we're going to have quite a few of the, August 15th guys too.
Well, it'll provide something for us to talk about on the Buzzcast.
Yes.
But similar to VC, Nashville needed a difference-making forward, and who knows whether he would have been a difference maker, like in the playoffs, for example.
I guess we'll find out, right?
Right, but the thing is, they could have used another scoring forward, and it's clear that VC has the ability to be an NHL scoring forward. He's shown that this year.
And Moy is a 6'1" center. Now, is he a playmaking center? No, this guy is a scorer. This is what he does. He is a scorer. So, again, with Nashville's scoring woes, I would think they're going to try and get him.
Well, but the thing that's interesting about Butcher is there is no team that we have talked about more about the pathetic nature of their defense than the Colorado Avalanche. And you've got a potential difference-making defenseman, and they've at this point looked like they've dropped the ball in terms of getting him locked up. And if he does go free agent and he does go someplace else, I mean, that's going to be a deep cut to Joe Sakic and the Avalanche. And, like I said, I mean, I have no inside information of where Will Butcher is going to go. All I know is I'm sure Toronto is I'm not sure they're interested, but there is a connection there between them and Denver with Trevor Moore, the free agent that they signed last year. Tyler Bozak is a University of Denver alum, and Bozak apparently had a part in attracting Moore to the Leafs. So with that connection, there is a possibility, and we know Lamoriello is somebody who loves finding gems in the NCAA. So it's them, it's Detroit, it's Buffalo, and there's a number of teams out there that are looking for defensive.
Yeah. He'll get 6 or 7 teams interested in him. There's no question in my mind. Other players who could get signed when the Frozen Four is over. Well, actually, Anders Bork, his time is over with Notre Dame, and I think Boston will sign him. So if Ty is watching this broadcast, I think he'll have something to cover soon. It's no inside information. It's just a gut feeling. And then Denver's Henrik Borgstrom is an interesting one. We'll see if Florida reaches out to try and sign him afterwards, whether he wins a championship or not. There's a lot of factors at play, so we'll just sort of leave that one because it's up in the air. But it's a good reason to, if you don't watch the game on ESPN2 on Saturday, then keep an eye on things afterwards, because a day or two after, we're going to start getting some word on some of these other guys signing. Dylan Gambrell is a Sharks guy. I mean, can you think of and this kid's been all world. He's sort of on the same path. I'm not saying he's the same player, but on the same path that Joe Pavelski was on when everybody was just figuring him out in college and how good he was getting every year. And it just seems like the Sharks are maybe the best team at signing or drafting, I should say, drafting college guys and then being able to sign them and get really good players out of it. I mean, again, Pavelski being their best.
Now, and I know there's Minnesota Duluth's captain, Dominic Toninato, is a 2012 or 2013 draft. I think it was 2013 of the Leafs. So it's the same situation. He's a senior. Do they sign him? Do they not sign him? He could sign an AHL contract.
I think he's going to end up signing like an AHL only deal.
Yeah. So
to start.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. Now, we talked about this yesterday and then got a little bit of clarification after the webcast yesterday. So I wanted to touch on this. Signing of Vladimir Sobotka by the St. Louis Blues. And I know you had a little because of the nature of the signing. Apparently,
I just think this is just.
Well, let me explain what happened. Apparently, he had an arbitration award with St. Louis 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He walked to the KHL at that point, leaving basically everything in limbo. He plays 3 years in the KHL. He vacates the last part of his contract, and apparently his team had been eliminated. He leaves the KHL. He comes to the U.S. and he accepts the offer. The arbitration, signs a 3-year contract, and now he gets to play immediately.
No, this is baloney, and I'll tell you why it's baloney. We've watched enough movies to know if this guy would have walked out of his house, like let's say he left his wife, and all of a sudden he's gone for 3 years. He comes back, the door's double locked. She's probably married the mailman, and he's got to find a place to live. But only in the NHL could you have an award like this and have it stand up for 3 years, never being talked about, never being, ratified or whatever word you want to use for it, and then all of a sudden it's still good? He should have to go through the arbitration process again. This is a bunch of bunk to sneak a guy into the playoffs. And this is, again, this is another advantage for a Russian player to just sort of slide into well, you know what? So what about the regular season? Like back in the day, I ripped Peter Forsberg for sort of jaking it during the regular season for Colorado, if you remember, and all of a sudden playing in the playoffs. Remember when he did that?
Yeah. And
very similar to that, and I'm taking a similar stance.
And like I said yesterday, I'm fairly sure that this is what happened with Radulov, because Radulov, it was the same thing. It was an arbitration. He was an RFA. He left for Russia. He came back to burn that last year. So he came back and played like 8 games, and I'm pretty sure it was after the deadline. So this loophole has been used before. And, I'm sure the Minnesota Wild aren't too happy because they're probably going to face St. Louis, and Sobotka is a pretty decent player.
Yeah,
He's not a superstar.
I don't like it. It's one of those things where you're almost giving an advantage to a guy who left your league. He left your league, and now he can come back at the best possible time without putting in any time. And I got to believe there's some players on the St. Louis roster that won't be happy to see him.
I'm not so sure about that.
If he's taking your spot, you're not happy to see him.
Well, okay, yeah. If you're Dmitry,
if you're Ivan Barbashev and he's taking your spot, how happy are you?
If you're Dmitry Yaskin, or if you're Magnus Pyarvi, yeah, probably. If you're Tarasenko, you're welcoming him with open arms.
Sure.
So, couple news and notes, and we'll talk about some draft stuff, and actually a little observation we made talking a couple days ago. Cam Fowler was injured in the last Anaheim game. The report came out yesterday. He will be out anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, which means probably most of the first round of the playoffs. Russ, he's had not a breakout year because he's always been a good defenseman, but he had a really, really good year to the point that they decided not to trade him. Mm-hmm. And his loss, now we know Anaheim is deep on the blue line, and Anaheim is probably going to play either Calgary or Nashville or St. Louis, depending on how the last weekend goes. But that's a loss for.
It's a loss. I mean, if it's Montour or Fowler, there's a big difference offensively there. Like, Fowler is a seasoned offensive guy who's great on the power play, and he's pretty good 5-on-5 offensively too. It's a loss. This is going to hurt Anaheim a bit. Now, their system will hide the flaw a little bit, but they're going to miss the points that he would normally put up in the playoffs.
And the interesting thing,
how long does he have again? How long?
2 to 6.
Yeah, so
I mean that's and probably into the second round based on if you're saying 2 to 6, I'll cut it down the middle and say 4. That means the second round. If it's closer to 2, that means if it's a game 7, maybe he gets in. But that's
gonna hurt him. It's gonna hurt him.
That's going to hurt him. Now, just touching on Anaheim here for another second, there is a little bit of a goaltender controversy right now. And it's surprising that there is because everybody thought, it's Gibson, it's Gibson, it's Gibson. Well, Bernier played great down the stretch, and, Gibson has come back, but there is some possibility that Bernier is
regular season. Boy, if they get duped into this, they're going to find out having a smaller goalie in the playoffs is going to hurt them. There are guys that are going to be just punishing him in the crease, and it's not going to be the same as what he's facing right now. This is fool's gold. I like Bernier. I do, but this is fool's gold. And Anaheim has fallen for this before, and I used to blame it on Boudreau. If this happens again, I guess I have to blame it on Murray because it just doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, it speaks to –
I don't care about these regular season wins Bernier's racking up at this point.
No, but it speaks to that Gibson can stay healthy, or we don't know what the extent of whatever injury he has.
I mean, look, if he's hurt to the point where he can't play, that's fine. But you're not telling me that. You're telling me that he could lose it outright, and I think that's stupid.
Right. I mean, hey, last year, because Anderson was hurt at the end of the year, they went with Gibson the first 2 games, and they yanked him and put Anderson in, and Anderson played well down the stretch and got them to Game 7, and then they lost in Game 7. So I'm not 100% sure what kind of confidence they have. We know Gibson's a good young goaltender, but the optimum word here is young. And whether, and this is Randy Carlyle we're talking about, he likes veteran guys.
Listen, you know what? Goalies are different, man. Like, this is you. We've seen this again. We've seen this with Anaheim before. Mm-hmm. I understand Anaheim won a cup, right? But they had Scott Niedermayer. They had some really great players. Chris Pronger, right? Jaguar was at the top of his game, right? They don't have that anymore. They have a really good defense, but they don't have Hall of Fame defensemen. And really, Jaguar is better than any goalie they have still, until Gibson maybe, grows into the kind of goalie I think he can be. So to sort of play around with this, they're playing with fire. That's all I could say.
Yeah, and if they go down early, I mean, it depends. If they go down, or if they play Gibson and they go down early, I don't think there's going to be much hesitancy to switch to Bernier, and vice versa. That's the thing. When you don't have a pure.
Remember, when you make that switch, if it doesn't work out and you switch back, you've lost the dynamic there. You have.
Well, yeah, if you switch, you can't switch back.
We've seen them switch back too. I mean.
Well, we've seen teams do it. We've seen Carolina do it when they won in 06, but there's been very few instances where you go back to back and then back again. It's like, you usually stick with one guy.
Usually.
Some good news, apparently, and it's sort of cursory reports. Sabres cannot release details on the Okposo situation. I guess there's HIPAA laws in place, and I think it's part of the CBA as well. But there's a report from AP that he is doing Kyle Okposo, the Sabre forward, is doing better for whatever ailment it is. So, I mean, that is a bit of good news, but it's still sort of shrouded in mystery what's going on. So
until sometime during the summer, when the Stanley Cup's over and the draft is over, maybe then we'll find out what his playing status will be down the road.
Yeah.
But I'm glad he's okay.
I mean, I don't want to speculate, but there are
no.
There are certain things, certain afflictions that if he has, his career might be over with. And
right. But right now we just worry about his health, and I'm glad his health is improving.
Exactly.
That's the main thing.
Now, Russ, we're starting to get geared up for the. I'm looking forward to the. I always look forward to the draft lottery, because that'll help us then sort of.
Which is the most boring thing in the world to watch, and we all watch it.
Well, I mean, it was exciting last year. I was at
for obvious reasons, but for the most part, it's the most boring thing to watch.
Yeah, I guess. But I think there's a little suspense in there. So I mean, I let's just say this: if I have an opportunity to go up and cover it, I will. But
You've covered worse. I get you.
But I mean, right now, and I know that you put out a list on Sportsology of your top 30.
Yeah.
The interest to me, and of course I'm looking at it through the blue and white prism of the Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
Are some of the defensemen. We've talked about Liljegren before and how his ratings, depending on who you talk to, are here or lower.
Yeah.
Vilimaki, the Finnish defenseman, we were talking about, and there was the other defenseman, the smaller defenseman that you mentioned, that you were saying his ratings were.
Cali Makar, yeah.
Makar. Now, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think this draft sort of allows a great swing of difference in rated, because opinions. I mean, we know opinions differ in every draft. But I think in one draft, you'll have somebody ranked 9th, and another draft prospect list, you have them ranked 21st.
Yeah, I think this is a draft where we're going to have a lot of differences across the board. And I did move Liljegren down to 4th, but really it's not so much a function of what he hasn't done. It's more of what Casey Middlestat is doing and continues to do. And I think that's really what's happening there. And that's what happens a lot of times. A lot of times it isn't the undoing of the player. It's really what the other player is just going to another level. And I think Middlestat is going to another level. So that's why I've got him 3rd. Patrick and Hischier, there's no change there. Valimaki, I still think, is underutilized as far as on people's lists. And I think they're not giving him his full due. I really do think he'll be a terrific NHL defenseman. Even if he's not a great point guy, he does everything else well. And there's something to be said about that. And
the thing for people who will be interested in trades and transactions at the draft, because this draft, and we saw a little bit of this at the deadline, because this draft isn't as high regarded as the last couple drafts. I think teams that are in the lower part of the draft it may be a lot easier for them to trade up into, say, the middle of the draft if there's somebody. For example, Liljegren falls from the top 5 into, the bottom of the top 10 or maybe into the low teens. If a team really likes likes him as a defenseman, it's not going to be extremely difficult for them to move up and trade up into the teens and to get him.
Yeah. Well, here's a good one. So, let's just talk about Makar for a minute, because a lot of people have him really highly rated. I'm right now, I'm at 20. He could move up. He had a great World Junior A Challenge. He's played in the AJHL, I think it is. And next year, right now, he's set to go to UMass Amherst, but you never know if he gets drafted. Some team may want him to play in the Canadian Hockey League, whatever. But he hasn't been on the elite Canadian teams yet. And so, I have Urho Vakanainen ranked higher than him. I've seen him play. He's 6'1", 181. Makar is 5'10", 176. Do I think Vakanainen will score as many goals or have as many points as Makar? No. But I have to think to myself, can Makar be half of what he's doing, in the current league he's in at the pro level, where Vakanainen, I know what he's doing, he'll do at the pro level. And that's not score a ton, but do everything else. Pass well, move up the ice, make good plays, always have your head up. That's half the battle. He'll get points. I remember telling you offline, a lot of these guys that we're not sure, or at least I'm not sure when I say, I don't know how many points he's going to get, still end up getting 25 to 27 points in the way the NHL game is played now, if they get enough minutes and they touch the puck enough. And so, Makar, you would be looking at a guy with Ryan Ellis kind of talent, and maybe even better. But again, he's 5'10". He's got to overcome that barrier of not so much bias, but just the size factor in the NHL, what he's going to be able to do and get done. So, it is playing into it, unfortunately, a little bit. And I know, look, I get mad when people talk about Yamamoto and size, but, he's also 5'8" as a forward, so I get it. And I try and look at both sides. 22nd, I have Jason Robertson. He's just ahead of Nick Suzuki, who's been all world. He's just been unbelievable in the playoffs. But Suzuki is 5'11", 183, and Robertson is 6'2", 190. They are both blowing it up. They play different positions. Suzuki's a center. Robertson's a left wing. But again, most teams now, when they're looking for a center, are looking for a center with a little bit of size. Doesn't mean Suzuki can't be a really fine NHL center. He can be. But he's really going to have to show people that he can do it. And so it's early in this process for me this year, so I still could change my mind on it. So anyhow, check out the list. You'll see there's guys like that. Noel Hoffenmeyer moved into the list. He's with the Ottawa 67s. He's been ripping it up lately. He retweeted me, so thanks, Noel. Appreciate that when a player does that.
Let me just say this. I mean, there are more examples of smaller forwards.
Yes.
And there are smaller defensemen. When we were talking about Makar, and one of the names that you mentioned was Torrey Krug, and I mentioned Torrey Krug gets hurt yesterday. That's one of the things. Your smaller defensemen, even if they're quick, even if they're great skaters, when they do get caught in the corner, the durability question is a big thing when it comes to smaller defensemen. So,
Makar's really fast, and he's going to have to be very elusive, which he could be.
Yeah. I mean, the one guy I look at that you have lower on your list, and I mentioned that he sort of intrigues me because not only because of NHL bloodlines, but because of his size and the fact that he's a good foot. And foot,
and I have Foot ahead of Makar at the moment, and that's really been a battle in my mind because I read you Foot's offensive numbers. They're great. But he's also got a bloodline. He's also got a long reach. He's got a knack of keeping pucks alive in the offensive zone when he's on the power play or just even at 5-on-5. And he's got a great first pass too. And he's 6'3", 209. That's, I have to give there's some credence there. So these are the battles that I sort of go through with a list like this. But Foot is somebody who could still move up a little on my list. And again, you'll notice that on this list of 30, and it's not 31 because it's not a mock draft, so don't ask me. I'm not going to retweet you or talk about it. I'll have a list of 45 coming out soon, and then everybody can shut up about that. No, I'm just kidding. But the point is, with a guy like Foote, with a list like this, there's time for me to change. It took me a little while for Max Domi. I didn't put him that high at the beginning, and people were yelling at me, and I just needed to see more, and I saw it. So we'll see how it works. But you'll notice there's not a ton of defensemen that I have in this top 30. And so if you're a team really looking for defense, not that you're not going to find one in the other rounds, you might, but you are going to have to, really get one of these guys in the first round if you really want almost an NHL guaranteed defenseman, because some of these guys are not guaranteed.
And I saw Nicholas Hague play for Mississauga, and you look at the size, you look at he's 6'5", 215, and unless you looked at him, unless you saw him play, he's a 6'5" offensive defenseman. He is not a defensive guy. He's not big and strong. He's very lanky, and he's going to need to put weight on. It's like that's a guy who I think is more of a developmental defenseman than.
That's why I've got him after Makar, because even though with those measurables, he is a project, where Makar, he's not a project. He's just finding a fit for.
Right. And we talked about this off the air, and it's like it's not, sometimes nice to go back and look at drafts and see the mistakes that were made, especially 2008, which was a defense-heavy draft.
Yeah.
Right now there is a lot of talk, and we talked about it a couple of days ago about Erik Karlsson potentially being winning the Norris for the third time. And
I'll be voting for it over the weekend, so I'm going to be thinking long and hard about that.
Yeah, well, I have to say it was very gratifying to vote for an NHL award for the first time. I voted for the Masterton, and in the next few years, I'll be able to vote hopefully for some of the other awards. If I had a vote for the Calder, I think who I'd vote for, and I think everybody's going to vote for that guy. But 2008, it was a defense-heavy draft, and Karlsson went 15th. I believe he was, and I'm looking at the list now. I think he was the 6th defenseman.
Yeah.
No, 7th defense. He was the 7th defense.
Yeah, 7th's about right, actually.
And that's okay. I'll just read off the list here. And I don't think anybody in Los Angeles can complain about the Drew Doughty pick. I don't think anybody in St. Louis can complain about the Alex Pietrangelo pick at 4. Right. Zach Bogosian at 3 by Atlanta. And then obviously Luke Schenn, who, Cliff Fletcher traded to trade up from 7 to 5 to get Luke Schenn, and then they rushed him. And then you go down to 12, which was actually a good pick, Tyler Myers. Tyler Myers had, I think, blown out his ACL with Kelowna the year before, so he probably went a lot lower than he probably should have, and he was Schenn's defense partner in Kelowna. And then Colton Tubert at 13, and then so I mean that's the thing. It's like you think when it comes to the draft, you think something about these guys, and somebody can just develop a lot better and become which Erik Karlsson is. Yeah,
it's player development. It's Erik Karlsson, when he was up for the draft, was 155 pounds. Yeah. He now weighs 191 pounds. So the Erik Karlsson you see now is a lot different than the Erik Karlsson. And actually, one website now has him at 192, so he just gained weight in the time that I was talking about him. This is, part of what goes into it. But I'll tell you, at the World Juniors, I saw him, and he was phenomenal. Actually, in 2008 and 9, well, actually, that was afterwards his draft year. It was 2008, right? So I guess it was the under-18s that I probably saw him in. And for the under-18s, he had 7 points in 6 games. And I knew he could run a power play. I had seen video of him and not really full games of him at that point. I may have watched one full game, and I was sold on him. I was like, this guy can be a pro. I don't care he's 155 pounds, but clearly other teams did care. Bogosian, I always felt like was getting his tires pumped because of his size and because he was – and at that point, a big American defenseman seemed like the way to go. Mike Komisarek had played that card and played it well, and he was supposed to always have a decent amount of offense. But really, when you look at Zach Bogosian, the last thing he has given you is offense. And it's funny because the 1 year in Peterborough where he blew it up, he had 11 goals and 61 points. He's had one double-digit goal season his entire NHL career. He's only got 49 goals. His point level has never gone above 30 points, which if you think about it, it's kind of crazy considering the expectations that were there for him. Now, I always felt like he played a rugged game, and as the injuries piled up a little bit, the mileage got on there, and that's why I was not in favor of the Sabres getting him. And really for the Sabres, he's had 41 points for them in 3 seasons.
He's been a disaster for the Sabres. And one thing, never get caught up when it comes to statistics when it comes to players playing in Sweden, because look at Carlson's numbers. The year he was drafted, he played in the second division for 7 games. He played 45 games in the SEL, 5 goals and 5 assists. He only had 10 points. He comes over the next year, plays 12 games in the AHL, has 11 assists in 12 games, and then comes up and scores 26 points in 60 games, and he's awesome. So the numbers that he put up in Sweden were not even applicable to what he was going to do in North America, because he has great speed, and it's a different game here. So,
well, it's a different game. Plus, over there, you don't know how much power play time he was getting. He's on a veteran team. You know, there's 35-year-olds that are getting the top power play. You don't know, you know, how many minutes he was getting a game. You don't know how many times he really had the puck in the offensive zone. Like all these things. This is why when you look at numbers from overseas, it's very misleading. You don't know, was he playing in juniors? Was he playing in the top league? All those things matter, and so it plays into it. You know, Luke Schenn, I always felt bad. I felt like he got rushed. I still think Luke Schenn's had a decent career. Is he a 5th overall? No, probably not. Well, but he's had a pretty good career.
It's funny, Russ. It's funny, Russ, because if you would have talked to Leafs fans after his rookie season, everybody would have said Luke Schenn, top 4 defenseman, a 20 to 25 minute guy. He's going to be tough. He's a right-hand shot. I mean, they were Luke Schenn very high, and then he stopped improving. He had that level, and then he never got any better. And then speed became a problem with him. I think he's about an average speed defenseman, you know, and that's I think killed him. I mean, he was a 5th overall pick, and I believe Carl Alsner was a 5th overall pick. And if you take the difference between Carl Alsner and Luke Schenn, Carl Alsner can skate.
Oh yeah, no question. Alsner's a really good skater.
And Luke Schenn, his skating is borderline. So one guy is going to hit it big in free agency over the summer, either with the Caps or somebody else, and Luke Schenn will be looking for another 1-year contract somewhere. So
here's the funny thing. So like with Tubert, what happened literally was, you know, he's drafted in this 08 draft, and the league starts changing and starts to get faster. He's a 6'4", 200-pound guy with not a lot of foot speed. And his last year in Regina, while he still had a lot of PIMs, because he always had a lot of PIMs, he had 40 points, 10 goals. He starts off in the ECHL. He's a 3-point guy in 10 games. Never, ever, ever gets points. Always gets PIMs, though. So he kicks around for a while. He plays a little bit with Edmonton. He doesn't cut it. You know, it just doesn't work out because of the way the league is. He's still playing. He's actually playing in Germany.
Yeah, I was gonna say the guy who's drafted after him might win his 3rd Norris, and the guy who's drafted 2 picks ahead of him is playing currently for the Nuremberg Thomas Sabo Ice Tigers.
Awesome name. What a name.
Yes. So whatever. Anyway, good show, Russ. We will be back on Monday. We will probably have Pete Weber, the radio play-by-play announcer.
Pete Weber, the bowler?
No. The play-by-play radio
really? Not that Pete Weber?
No, the guy who likes Slapshot, the play-by-play radio play-by-play announcer.
Right. I mean, he's pretty good too, but I thought we had Pete Weber, the bowler.
No pelvic thrusts.
Okay. All right.
of the Nashville Predators. He will be with us to discuss the preview of the Western Conference, and we will discuss what happened in the Eastern Conference. For many Lake Ontario, they hope their team wins one of the two games this weekend and prevents a Herculean collapse of epic proportions. We'll get to see what the matchups are in the East, but we will be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.